My alcoholic wife framed me as the drunk to steal our daughter, and her undefeated lawyer brother helped her lie. So I recorded her abusive rants, then had her own best friend take the stand. Yesterday, she was dragged from the courtroom screaming as the judge awarded me full custody. The first sound I heard on my daughter's 5th birthday was the thump 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 of her tiny feet racing down the hall. A moment later, the bed dipped, and a small warm body launched itself onto my chest. "Daddy, Daddy, wake up, it's my birthday!" Lily's voice was pure sunshine, a force of nature that could banish any shadow. I opened my eyes to her beaming face, framed by a mess of blonde hair. This was my world. This was everything. I'm up, my little princess," I groaned, wrapping her in a bear hug. She'd been talking about her princess tea party for months, a grand affair where all her stuffed animals would be honored guests. But she had one special request. She wanted me to join not as a king, but as a fellow princess. So, hidden in my closet was my secret weapon. "I have a present for you, but it's really for me," I teased, leading her downstairs. I pulled out the box, and her eyes widened as she tore it open. Inside was a garish, adult-sized princess gown made of cheap, shiny satin, complete with a plastic tiara that looked like it would snap if you breathed on it too hard. "What is this, Daddy?" she asked, her head tilted. "Well," I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "to go to a princess tea party, a daddy needs to be a princess, right?" Gasp! The sound she made was pure, unadulterated joy. She practically squeezed me into that ridiculous dress herself, her giggles echoing through the house as I struggled with the zipper. We spent the morning making iced tea and tiny, lopsided sandwiches. I sat on a too-small chair, my knees up to my ears, the plastic tiara digging into my scalp, and listened as she introduced me to Sir Reginald the bear and Baroness Fluffington the rabbit. Every few minutes, she'd stop, look at me in my gaudy blue dress, and burst into a fit of giggles, proclaiming, "This is the best birthday ever, ever." And in that moment it was. I was a 200-pound man in a dress, and I had never felt more like a king. But paradise is a fragile thing. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, her little arms wrapped around my neck in a hug that felt desperate. "Please don't leave, Daddy," she whispered into my shoulder, her voice thick with a sleepiness that couldn't quite mask her anxiety. I held her tight, telling her stories about brave knights and silly dragons until her breathing evened out and she drifted off. I kissed her forehead, the scent of birthday cake still clinging to her hair, and quietly closed her door. Then, I walked into the living room, collapsed onto the couch, and broke down. The silence of the house was a physical weight, pressing down on me until I couldn't breathe. The truth was a poison seeping into the edges of our perfect day. My alcoholic wife Rachel and I were in the final, brutal stages of a divorce, and she was fighting for full, sole custody of our daughter. She wasn't just my ex-wife, she was my enemy, and I knew she would burn the whole world down, starting with me, to get what she wanted. The terrifying part wasn't just Rachel, it was her weapon of choice, her own brother Matt. Matt wasn't just a lawyer, he was a legal virtuoso, a courtroom shark who had never, ever lost a custody case. He was a master of narrative, a puppeteer who could make a jury see whatever he wanted them to see. I knew because I'd seen him do it before, in a case that had become the stuff of local legend. He'd taken on a case for a woman who was, by all accounts, a complete train wreck. She had a documented history of alcohol abuse, no job, and lived in a dilapidated apartment in the worst part of town. The father, on the other hand, was the perfect dad on paper. A steady 9-to-5, good income, a clean, spacious apartment in a safe neighborhood. Everyone, including the father's own lawyer, thought it was a slam dunk. The dad would get full custody of their 3 kids, no question. But then Matt stepped in. Boom. He didn't just defend the mom, he launched a counter-offensive that was breathtaking in its audacity. He tore the father's case apart, piece by bloody piece. He brought in character witnesses' neighbors, a former boss from a job she'd held for 3 months, to talk about how the mom was turning her life around and how deeply she loved her kids. He painted her not as a screw-up, but as a hero, a phoenix rising from the ashes of her past for the sake of her children. The craziest part, the move that left everyone's jaw on the floor, was how he handled her addiction. He didn't hide it or excuse it, he weaponized it. He argued that her struggles with alcoholism didn't make her a bad parent. They made her a more empathetic, more resilient one. He spun this insane narrative that because she had faced demons, she was uniquely equipped to protect her children from the darkness of the world. He convinced the court that her tough life had forged her into a stronger, more loving parent than the stable, successful father could ever be. And he won. The mom got the kids. The perfect dad was reduced to weekend visits, his world shattered. I would lie awake at night, that story replaying in my head. A cold, heavy dread would settle in my stomach. If Matt could do that for a total stranger, what unholy magic would he perform for his own sister? What chance did I have against a man who could turn poison into medicine? I was terrified, but every time I looked at Lily's sleeping face, I knew I had to fight. No matter how good Matt was, no matter how dirty Rachel played, I had to fight for my daughter. The opening salvo came in the form of a thick manila envelope. Legal documents. Inside, nestled among the dry legal jargon, was Rachel's official declaration to the court. My hands shook as I read it. The lies were so blatant, so audacious, they felt like a physical assault. She claimed I was the one with the drinking problem, that I was an irresponsible, stumbling drunk who was a danger to our child. She painted a picture of me as a monster, alleging I was verbally abusive, that I had made her life a living hell throughout our marriage. It was a complete inversion of reality. She was the one who hid vodka bottles in laundry baskets and under the bathroom sink. She was the one whose moods would swing violently, 1 minute loving, the next screaming with a rage that terrified me. But there it was, in black and white, her story all lined up, complete with detailed, fabricated incidents. She even went so far as to claim that I neglected Lily, that I couldn't be bothered to care for my own kid. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror where all my best qualities, my love, my patience, my devotion were twisted into something ugly and monstrous. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was a war for my daughter's soul. And I was standing on the battlefield completely alone. The courtroom felt like a vacuum, sucking all the air and warmth out of the world. I sat beside my lawyer, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the table. Across the room, Rachel took the stand. She looked small and fragile in a modest gray dress, a picture of suffering innocence. Then she started to speak, and a tidal wave of carefully crafted lies crashed over the room. Her voice trembled as she recounted fabricated stories of my rages. She told the court I was a secret drinker, a man who hid his addiction behind a facade of being a devoted father. Gasp. The sound came from somewhere in the gallery, someone buying her performance. With Matt gently guiding her, she painted me as a verbal abuser, a man who chipped away at her self-worth until she was nothing. He told me I was worthless, she whimpered, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, that no one else would ever want me. It was a line she had screamed at me in a drunken fury just a few months ago. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. Matt was a master conductor. He'd take a perfectly normal event and twist it into something sinister. The time I worked late for a week to meet a project deadline, I was abandoning my family. The evenings I was quiet and withdrawn because I was exhausted from her chaos. I was using the silent treatment as a form of emotional torture. He was building a monster, brick by brick, using my own life as his material, and the court was watching the construction with rapt attention. Then came the witnesses. Boom. A mutual acquaintance, someone I'd always thought was a friend, took the stand. They spoke of a time they saw me looking angry at a barbecue. A neighbor Rachel had only started talking to a month before the separation testified that she sometimes heard raised voices from our house. They were half-truths and vague impressions, but under Matt's expert questioning, they solidified into a damning pattern. I was being buried alive under an avalanche of whispers and innuendo, and every time my lawyer tried to object, Matt would counter with a smooth, unshakable calm that made our defense look frantic and guilty. I walked out of the courtroom each day feeling like I'd been beaten. The system I had trusted was failing. Truth didn't matter. Only the best story mattered, and Matt was the greatest storyteller I'd ever seen. A cold, hard realization settled in my gut. I couldn't win by playing by their rules. I had to create my own evidence. I had to show the court the real Rachel, the one who hid behind the mask of a victim. That night, my heart hammered against my ribs as I prepared to call her to discuss the visitation schedule. My hand trembled as I opened the voice recorder app on my phone. Click. The timer started counting up in silent red numbers. It felt slimy, dishonest, a violation. But then I pictured Lily's face, her worried eyes asking me if I was going to leave, and the sick feeling in my stomach was replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. Hello? Her voice on the other end was already thick, slurring slightly. It was only 8 p.m. You need something? She snapped, the manufactured sweetness from the courtroom gone, replaced by her usual raw hostility. I kept my voice calm, asking about a time to pick Lily up for the weekend. Her response was a torrent of irrational anger and accusations. You're trying to turn her against me. You think you're so perfect, Mr. Father of the Year, but I know who you are. The recording captured every slurred word, every baseless threat, every ounce of the venom she reserved just for me. When I hung up, I saved the file. It was my first piece of the truth. The charade of supervised visits began. Because of her allegations, a court-appointed supervisor had to be present whenever Rachel saw Lily. The first time she arrived 20 minutes late, her car screeching to a halt at the curb. The supervisor, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Gable, made a note on her clipboard. Rachel stumbled out of the car, a sickly sweet cloud of perfume, failing to mask the faint, acrid smell of stale wine. She tried to play it off, blaming traffic, but her movements were just a little too slow, her smile a little too wide. I filmed it all from my phone, discreetly. The video showed her fumbling with her purse, her eyes struggling to focus on Lily. It was damning. But the real cost of this war wasn't measured in legal fees or lost sleep. It was measured in the light that was slowly dimming in my daughter's eyes. One evening, as we were building a Lego castle, she stopped and looked up at me, her little brow furrowed. "Daddy," she asked, her voice barely a whisper, "is Mommy mad at me?" The question was a physical blow knocking the wind out of me. I pulled her into my lap, my throat tight. "No, sweetie, of course not. Mommy is just having a hard time right now. She loves you more than anything." But she wasn't convinced. She'd seen the real Rachel during those visits, the one who was impatient and distant, the one who couldn't be woken from her naps on the couch. My daughter was collateral damage in a war she never asked for, and the guilt was a constant burning fire in my chest. I knew I was running out of time. The court was leaning heavily in Rachel's favor, and I could feel the final verdict approaching like a freight train. I had my secret recordings and a few blurry videos, but I knew, deep down, it might not be enough to stop Matt's perfect, terrible story. The day my lawyer chose to fight back felt different. The air in the courtroom was thick, with a sense of finality. Rachel had finished her performance, Matt had rested his case against me, and I could feel the judge's skepticism aimed squarely in my direction. My lawyer, a quiet, methodical man named Mr. Davis, leaned over. "It's time," he said, his voice low. "I'm calling Lily to the stand." My blood ran cold. "Number, we can't put her through that." I had fiercely resisted this, wanting to shield her from the ugliness of it all. "We have to," he insisted, his eyes firm. "The only thing that can cut through a lie this big is the simple, honest truth. Trust me." I looked across the room at Rachel, who wore a faint, smug smile. She thought she had won. I nodded at Mr. Davis, a sick feeling churning in my stomach. Lily walked toward the stand, holding a bailiff's hand, her patent leather shoes making soft, shuffling sounds on the polished floor. She looked so impossibly small in the enormous witness box, her little legs dangling high above the ground. The judge softened his expression, speaking to her in a kind, gentle voice, asking her name and how old she was. And then, it was time. My lawyer asked her, "Lily, can you tell the court about your daddy?" She looked right at me, her blue eyes wide and serious. "I love my daddy so much," she said, her small voice clear as a bell in the silent room. "He's the best daddy in the whole world. He makes me good food every day, and he reads me bedtime stories every night, even when he's tired." My heart ached with a mixture of pride and pain. "I want to stay with Daddy." When the judge gently asked about her mother, her face clouded over. "Mommy loves me too," she said, "loyal to the end. But she doesn't like to play dolls with me. She sleeps a lot, and I can't wake her up. And sometimes she gets mad and yells. But Daddy never yells." Gasp. The sound was quiet, but it rippled through the gallery. It was a single, devastating crack in the perfect facade Rachel and Matt had built. I saw Matt's jaw tighten. Lily's innocent words had done more damage in 30 seconds than my lawyer had managed in a week. As she left the stand and came back to sit with me, I pulled her into a hug, so tight I was afraid I might break her. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered, my voice thick. This was a truth Matt couldn't twist. That's when Mr. Davis stood up. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing with newfound confidence. "In light of this testimony, I would like to present evidence that directly pertains to the well-being of the child." Before Matt could even formulate an objection, my lawyer placed a digital recorder on the table. Click. The courtroom was filled with the sound of Rachel's voice, not the soft, wounded whimper of a victim, but the harsh, slurring snarl of a drunk. "You think you're so perfect? You're trying to steal my daughter," she screamed through the speakers, her words thick and ugly. I risked a glance at Rachel. Her face had gone chalk white. She was shrinking in her chair, trying to disappear. Boom! Mr. Davis wasn't finished. "And now, Your Honor, a short video taken during a recent supervised visit." He turned a laptop toward the judge. On the screen was Rachel, stumbling in the park, her eyes unfocused, arguing belligerently with the court-appointed supervisor while Lily watched from a nearby bench, looking lost and afraid. The video played in its entirety, a silent, brutal indictment of her lies. The courtroom was dead quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the courthouse's air conditioning. Rachel sunk her head into her hands, her shoulders shaking, but there were no tears this time. But the final, fatal blow was yet to come. "The defense calls its final witness, Mr. Davis announced, Sarah Peterson." I saw Rachel's head snap up, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror. Sarah was her best friend, her confidant, the one person she had trusted with everything. Matt shot to his feet. "Objection. Relevance?" he sputtered, his usual composure completely gone. "Overruled," the judge said, his eyes fixed on the witness stand. "Let's hear what Miss Peterson has to say." Sarah walked to the stand, her face pale, refusing to look at Rachel. Under oath, she reluctantly, painfully dismantled every lie her friend had told. She admitted that Rachel had a serious, long-term drinking problem. She testified that Rachel had often confided in her, bragging about how she was going to destroy me in court. And then came the knockout punch. Sarah's voice dropped to a near whisper. She even laughed about it, she said, finally looking at the judge. She laughed about how easy it was to turn his own parents against him, how she had everyone fooled. The courtroom was frozen in a moment of stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Rachel shot out of her chair, her face a mask of pure fury. "Liar! You're a liar!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Sarah. "He paid you, didn't he? He's a monster. He's twisting everything." Her victim act had shattered, revealing the raging, unstable person she truly was. Bang! 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 The judge's gavel hammered down, but Rachel was lost in her own hysteria, her words devolving into incoherent sobs and accusations. Matt looked visibly flustered, trying to calm his sister, but the damage was irreversible. The perfect narrative had been blown to pieces by the one thing he could never control, the truth. The judge looked at Rachel with cold, undisguised disapproval. "This court will take a recess," he declared, his voice booming over the commotion. As security escorted a screaming Rachel from the room, I felt the tension in my shoulders release for the first time in months. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. A real, genuine hope that Lily and I were going to be okay. The storm had finally broken, and through the clearing clouds, I could see the sun.